Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and in these very strange and trying times, I promised you that we would do a watch-along of the now infamous Event 201 exercise that took place in October of 2019, was put on by Davos, aka the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Johns Hopkins. Now, why is this significant? Because these are all the same people that are telling you the same things that they were telling you months ago in a televised and streamed tabletop exercise. All unelected bureaucrats. I didn't vote for them. You didn't vote for them. And the big headline that is all over social media right now is the Department of Justice wants to suspend constitutional rights of Americans during this crisis. I hate to tell everybody, very deceptive headline, they've already done so. It's already been done. They're treating you like children. Everything now is classified and scripted. The continuity of government program has already been activated, and this is already in motion. We are watching that slow rollout. 1929 meets 1984 meets 9/11 in a global transformative event. So to get people up to speed on where we are in this video, let's talk about it very quickly. Because if you didn't see the first part, you missed some jaw-dropping stuff. This exercise, although significantly different in the region of origin, proposes that a coronavirus outbreak, a novel coronavirus outbreak that came from pigs, again, some kind of animal, is now turning into a global pandemic. And what this man has been selling you on is the idea, and remember, this idea is now already out here with the coronavirus, that we would rather have a vaccine for this thing, okay, and we don't think we can get one in the next year, year and a half. We're looking at 18 months, and even then, it's a long shot. But what else is he talking about? Antivirals. And specifically, they're talking about the fact that some countries are going to hold out on certain antivirals, hence why we have to work with all these big businesses. I mean, this is uber fascism. So right now, what he's talking about is also significant because when we talk about medications and the supply chain, and that's what they're talking about, China has already specifically warned the United States that they could cut them off from that medical supply chain. All right? So once again, tabletop exercise, October 2019, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins. Here we go. Oh, sorry. Here we go.
Still others are recommending that suppliers, buyers, and countries entrust a central international entity or organization with the job of allocation and distribution decisions
Global
for
governance.
at least a portion of antivirals and other medical supplies.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this. How should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most? We now have time for discussion about this matter. This is the focus of this meeting.
Now, again, I want to say, you didn't vote for any of these people, all right? If you notice behind me, to the left of the gentleman is somebody from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You have somebody here from Marriott Hotels. Remember, they're going to be retrofitting buildings, hotels, dorms into hospitals. This is going to be a full-on military effort right now that's unrolling in the United States. Believe the hype, because the hype is over. The National Guard has been deployed. Anybody that was saying I was a fearmonger 2 weeks ago, see how my videos have aged. I wish they didn't age well. I wish that this was the end of Jason Burmis and that I had lost my mind and that I wasn't about to have military rolling out on the streets. But it's a reality now, isn't it?
Any reactions? We have too few antivirals for the needs that we have, and we're projecting to have increasing needs.
See everybody looking at the
So
little
should
script
we
on the
let
bottom?
normal suppliers and buyers manage the distribution and allocation of this medication? Should government step in? If so, with what rules? Steve?
Yeah, Let me start by saying it is fantastic how much has been learned about this disease in just the short period of time since its discovery.
And let me stop you right here. You notice how he's asked a direct question, but just like when you see on the news, everybody's patting and telling you how great the task force is and how tireless everything is. But at the same time, they're preparing you, talking to you about FDR, wartime, Rosie the Riveter. All right? 9/11's been invoked a lot lately, hasn't it? People were wondering why I was saying that. Well, now the script's out. And again, the easement, the preparedness, the way they're patting you on the head like a pet and treating you like one.
I think one issue that hasn't yet been explored is what could be done to suppress transmission apart from the use of countermeasures. And so I think that's something that needs to be an active area of study. Learning where transmission is occurring would be helpful in order to implement measures that don't require medicines to suppress transmission. Maybe hospital settings, school settings are places where transmission could be occurring. With regards to the question of sharing this scarce resource, we do have some models that I think could be built upon.
So I just want to point out the military guy you didn't vote for that works for the CDC out of the gates really isn't interested in treating the problem with any kind of antivirals or medicine. He's laying it out right here, measures that are what are going to lead to what? Call it self-isolation if you want. Call it lockdown if you want. Don't use the hard term quarantine. But again, it's all about language and movements. This guy right here, with his medals over here, and his CDC title, he's going to tell you, you know what? Let's find the problem areas and let's start quarantining people.
The PIP framework, the things that were done during H1N1 to share vaccine, I think each of those models should be explored as ways of some sort of distribution process. One of the specific things that was done during H1N1 was to examine the critical individuals in countries as a sort of a minimum level of countermeasure that would be needed, and to
So do you mean critical infrastructure?
Exactly.
Critical infrastructure
Right.
in countries going?
Security, police, fire. What number of treatment courses? If we had enough to share, what would that minimum number be, just as a starting point for negotiation?
Great, Adrian. And then
I think before we agree that we have a finite resource, we need to really challenge ourselves on the vaccine production.
So what's the next thing? Like I said, he's pushing soft containment, quarantine, vaccine. I mean, are we even going to have a say in this at the end of the day? Or is the mob going to make everybody take it, whether you got this virus or not? Are they going to make people who suffered from coronavirus and then recovered take the vaccine as well?
We've seen historically that we can actually produce an Ebola vaccine in a year. It requires flexibility on the regulatory side. It requires commitment from companies. But I do think that before we say that a vaccine is not available, we should not slow down.
And by the way, every time they talk about relaxation, they're talking about human experimentation. I want that to be very clear. And that's already happened to a mother of two who said she wanted to do something. Go ahead, look up the headline. We'd do it live, but I want to move through the second half of this because there's 5 parts. And I feel like we should go through every single one of them.
And that we should pursue that. And I think similarly, we need to explore how could we accelerate production of our antivirals. We've seen it happen before in the HIV crisis. It's possible, but decisions need to be made, and we need to bring the right people together to do that.
Okay. And for the moment, before we are able to accelerate production of the antiviral, do you have any initial reaction, since you are potentially one of the companies that could be part of this deliberation?
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical. I think the second thing is it's going to be very important that for the business sector, for manufacturers of antivirals that we have clarity around what the need is and where the need is and who are making the decisions.
So that's Johnson & Johnson, by the way. Again, in a situation like this, I don't know why the National Guard just wasn't getting involved beforehand, making the tests, the ventilators on mass levels, not taking things from eminent domain, but picking up pieces of property and factories that had already been abandoned and retrofitting them. Hence, giving them, a refurbishment free to whoever owned that property. Eventually, it would be go back. But no, that would make too much sense. I mean, what do we pay taxes for? If we're talking about our national security, and this is a national security issue, why wouldn't you do that? That way you don't have to really mobilize the military against the people. You don't have to bring the Army Corps of Engineers in, because the National Guard should be able to handle it. And if you do, you do it on a minimum level. You don't do it with black SUVs coming into New York City and dropping off soldiers.
So who's deciding on where they're going? Okay.
So can I add to that?
Yes.
So one of the challenges we have is what to do in the really short term about the supply of vaccines, antivirals, etc. Because low to middle income countries will be concerned that the entire supply chain will be tied up by the time they can even figure out how to finance.
Finance? This is a bank. We have to finance it. Well, I got news for people. How many people lost their job in the last week? How many moratoriums are out there already? How many declarations that it's going to be impossible to evict somebody are already out there? You don't think that's going throughout the whole thing? Hasn't the market already crashed? Anybody who's telling you that it's normal for the stock market to be online only and have suspended trade 3 times in 2 weeks while gutting the middle class and the upper middle class and the 401ks, that was normal and couldn't have been predicted, is ridiculous. I predicted it. Go watch my videos with even James Corbett a couple weeks before. And as the market collapsed, I said, listen, they're going to do pump and dumps. They're going to get all these fools to buy in at low that are middle class, that maybe have a couple $1 million, a couple 100,000. Okay? So these bank people, I mean, give me a break.
Their purchases. We know, and we know this from what happened with H1N1, that if you can stop something early in terms of everything from ring fencing in particular countries, but also to look at the transmission from country to country, and there's a variety of measures that can be taken to do that. But unless that is done in a global context and it's done very early, we will end up with a situation where the entire supply chain will have gone. So what we need to do at the very outset is figure out what the likely route of transmission is and move very quickly to secure supplies and distribute supplies according to whatever epidemiological protocol and based on what Steve says, as we know, we already know some things about the transmission of this disease.
Let's stop with the transmission. If you believe anything these people are saying about the transmission and the 40 to 70% numbers and the fact that everybody I've seen that's been tested who lives with their family, they all turn up positive too, how Cuomo and Trump have said this is many more times, and Tony Fucello or whatever his name is there, that little rat, they've all said it's way more infectious than the flu. We can talk about droplets all day, but we know that the N95 masks are in full use. You see the gear people are wearing. So the transmission is being around people. That's how the transmission is. It's airborne, okay? So I get it. This is a tabletop exercise. But as it expands, you'll see the script has already been out. It's already there.
But unless we do that whilst doing what we can do on vaccine, I agree, we will have this get out of control.
Okay, Tim.
I agree with
Yeah, we'll go down the line.
it's important, and it's fantastic to have this information in front of us, because if you look across the countries, you've got very different patterns already. Chile seems to have a 3% case fatality rate, Ecuador a 5%. So what's going on there, and are there lessons in terms of how they're managing the outbreak, which might inform ways in which you're going to decrease the need for scarce resources?
Let's stop. This is a World Bank guy. Again, someone you never elected. Look at these globalists. People talk about globalization. You're looking at it right here. It's right in your face. You know, people like to spin a lot of times that, oh, he doesn't mean globalists. You know, he means something else. No, these are the people. They got faces, they got names. And, you know, I'll believe this wasn't a synthetic event, that there isn't some type of bioweapon at play when one of these people die, when a billionaire drops dead, when one of the predator class goes down from this. Because conveniently, I think most of them are going to be able to ride this out no matter what happens. So let's listen more to this, this World Bank representative.
More effective in their supportive treatment, or what is it that's explaining what look to be significantly different patterns in the outbreak of the epidemic? The second point is that these are all middle-income countries or high-income countries, and as Jane mentioned, low-income countries are either their surveillance systems aren't sensitive enough to detect cases that are already there, or are worried that, in fact, they will be at the bottom of the food chain. And in this respect, the World Bank would probably be proactively moving into exercising what we call a CIRC, which is a contingency emergency response component to existing loans to low and middle income countries, in which they can repurpose those loans for these types of emergencies.
And this is the thing I keep telling people. At the end of this, the World Bank's still going to exist. The predator class is still going to exist. What he's basically saying is we're going to extort countries at the end to refinance things, and we're going to own them. We're going to own them. You think we own them now? Huh? We're going to own them big time after this. And we're not talking about just, you know, third world nations. You know, he's talking about middle and high income nations. You know what's happening to the lower income nations? Look at what's happening in Iran. Look at what sanctions do. I mean, these guys are the real gangsters. Just because they don't talk in an Italian accent and they are not portrayed as such in some popular television show that you're brainwashed to love doesn't mean that this guy isn't as ruthless and cutthroat as any serial killer you can imagine.
So I think on the financing side, the CIRCs, which are built into every loan made by the bank, could be exercised in such a way that you don't have the problem of the lack of resources being the primary constraint for the purchase of those scarce commodities.
Okay, Latoya?
I agree, because financially, that's one of the things we'll have to look at. We have to have the financial means to start production, mass production, and getting companies on board. It's about buy-in and having an understanding of where we're moving forward with this disease process, how quickly and rapidly it's proliferating, and also utilizing the materials that we do know, like the protective equipment that we already have. We know it's airborne, so ensuring that companies that are manufacturing these products have the financial ability to be able to do such. So that way, even if we are in the process of continuing to develop this drug, there is some type of protection.
So once again, we got it airborne. Now we're talking about manufacturing. We're already past all this in real life, by the way, right? This is a stage we're already past. We've identified it's airborne. We've identified, but think about it. Only a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, they were just telling you go on about your normal life. And in the city where it was exploding, and they were doing selective testing outside of the city to man the New Rochelle station to later deploy the military in, which they're doing. You know, I had a fraternity brother comment on the fact that I said, this is it. This is your last chance to get out of New York City. He said, I was just through New Rochelle and nothing odd going on there. And I go, I know, because it wasn't a real containment zone. It was never a containment zone. It was a staging zone. I told you that. So just like they talk to you in pieces and in gradual pat you on the head, you're our little pet, do as we say language in real life, they do so here. Well, we know it's airborne and we're not going to have any antivirals, and boy, we need that vaccine. But the first thing is to protect everybody with physical masks and such. Fat Boy says, faces of the deep state, the real government. Yes, this is the true. Listen, we got continuity of government, so we got some dark, nasty, military industrial complex spook action going on here. These are the global players. This is why I played Shade the Motion Picture last night.
That's going on to the lower company.
Great. So I'm going to keep going down the line, but just in terms of the initial reactions, do we think, as Adrian suggested, that there should be some kind of international resource or distribution method, or really is this going to be every country for itself?
Should we bow down to the United Nations? Should we further empower global governance? Everybody wonders why, I basically shifted all my focus to this event. It's because it's what I've been talking about for how long? Go watch my film, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined. If you don't think that this is going to empower, everybody thinks that this is going to take down globalization. No. This is going to empower the mechanisms of authoritarian world government.
Doing what it can to procure N95 masks, antivirals for itself. And so just think about that as you're making your comments. Yeah.
Well, I do think that there needs to be sort of an honest broker, a centralized command and control organization that really...
We should have an honest broker. Do any of you think any of the people up there are honest?
brings together the public-private sector, both on a global approach and also on a local approach, because we can't forget that transparency and communications at the local level are going to be critical in the continued to stop the continued spread. But I do think there needs to be some form of centralized approach to really organize all the various efforts that are going to be undertaken.
Okay, I think a lot of people want to get in here. We'll go around the table. Martin, Sophia, Chris, and then George.
Thank you. I fully support the centralized approach in this state we have already, if it comes also to global distribution of any products. And I would like to go back to Stephen's first statement. We had parallel to this, we should really focus on how the spread could be controlled better or easily. If I talk about logistics for globally distributed topics, we need to protect the staff that is responsible for this. If they don't protect it, they won't do this. And then the entire chain breaks apart within no days.
So what he's saying is, if we don't protect the staff that's going to distribute this, the supply chain will be broken. Well, we've already seen the supply chain broken. That's what happened in China. That's why we knew that's how I could call at least the financial stuff so well a couple weeks ago. Because remember, we visually saw from NASA that everything had basically shut down production-wise in a very large nation of 1.2 billion people. Okay? And that supply chain was not up and running again until after they moved the Uyghur Muslims in from the prison camps, something that should have been headlines across the world and discussed thoroughly in our media, and it was not. It was not. We could talk about, suicide nets and Foxconn and the, poor conditions and the slave-like labor that's already taking place there. But there is no debate when you are in prison and then you are moved from prison into factories, you have slave labor. Well, that already had broken this supply chain. And who knows what kind of gear. Do you think they care much about their prisoners in China? You think we're getting the straight dope? I mean, again, we haven't even really discussed mortality rates of the virus, all that. I'm talking response. I'm talking tabletop exercises. I'm talking predator class takeover.
So we really have to do both parallel to find out possible ways to protect the people that are in charge for this, and it should be centralized, organized, otherwise it will not work.
So you're saying that the people who are delivering these medicines and moving them around the world, they should be protected by these medicines
Yes.
and N95 masks?
I mean, there's basic protection anyway in a phase like this, but we should enlarge this with the newest information we have about the spreading. Only with this we can guarantee that any distribution is possible at all.
Okay, Sophia?
So basically, he's also saying like selective giving medicine. Now, I just want to say the testing has already been selective. And especially, obviously, the wealthier, people who are famous, people that are connected are getting tests while others are not. I mean, those reports are coming out everywhere. That's mainstream media at this point.
I agree, and I wanted to speak to the point about having the honest broken. I think in this regard, the United Nations fits the bill.
UN Foundation.
That given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership. And I think taking the example of the Ebola crisis last round, when a trust fund was established, and calling on member states who are capable of contributing to that trust fund in order to help those that are least capable, the low and middle income countries. Thank you.
Chris?
Thanks, Tom. I want to agree with a couple of comments. One is about the need to prioritize for the frontline health workers, the basic people to keep the system working.
First of all, this is a minion of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation right here. And you just saw a minion of the UN. You see how they work hand in glove? Hand in glove. No one voted for these people. You didn't vote for them. I didn't vote for them. We're just supposed to trust the technopoly minions, the predator class minions, global governance. I'm not down like a clown, Charlie Brown. I'm going to speak out while I can, because who knows how much longer we're going to be able to speak out. In fact, you know, I tried to share a video today. It was one of the more positive videos I put out on this thing. Not my video, but somebody else's on this whole coronavirus. It was, I'm not afraid of the coronavirus because I have a plan. Pretty tame stuff. I mean, basically the guy was telling you to keep your immune system up, exercise, breathing, staying calm, enjoying yourself. You know, basic stuff. Basic stuff. It wasn't, you know, wash your hands and put sanitizer all over your nutsack. They took that down due to community standards. Now, luckily, I've been blessed enough that so far none of my work has been taken down from YouTube. And some of my stuff gets manually reviewed, and then it gets remonetized, which gives it a bigger chance to go viral. Right now, though, I'm not getting stuff reviewed for days for some reason. I mean, obviously, they have less of a staff, but that would be kind of a work-from-home job, right? I don't know. I'm not trying to bring up any conspiracy theories. But the bottom line is I haven't given out any false information. You're listening to these things from the horse's mouth. So here's the minion of the Bill and Melinda Gates Globalist Foundation, the people that are openly pro-eugenics, openly pro-population control, openly pro-sterilization. This guy.
I think it's important to recognize that we have the data that you're showing because of some remarkable international collaboration about sharing information in real time about the patterns of disease. And that's come out of the international health regulations, and that's a good first step. If we're now going to try to prioritize the allocation of scarce commodities, having this kind of dashboard to know where those masks and drugs are, and to get at some of the psychology that's behind some of the hoarding.
Again, could the script get any more like what you're seeing on television? Shaming people. Right now, Dollar Tree is trending. Now, you remember, I told you Dollar Tree was kind of like a little bit of a gold mine for people that had not stocked up, and they had a lot of non-perishables. And, you know, a lot of people yelled at me because I told people that they were mad. Well, I used it for my family. And the thing that's trending is some woman bought every piece of toilet paper from Dollar Tree. Okay. I don't think she's selling it. I think they're telling you now, not 2 to 3 months, not 3 to 6 months. They're telling you 6 months and longer. Do you have any idea how much you poo diddly-oo and your family, you know, does their business in 6 months? Back off. If this woman's smarter than everybody else, and then they show a picture of a poor old woman by the empty racks. Look, I don't like that old woman doesn't have toilet paper. But you know how many people, you know, I'll tell you what, at the Dollar Tree, I did 4 trips. 3 times I got the same old lady who laughed in my face every time I warned her and told her to stock up. Everything I said, you know, she was the talking points. Oh, that's not going to happen. They'll just be here to help. We're only going to be in 2 to 3 weeks. The kids will have school again. You know, totally in denial. And I'm out of that denial. And that's why I've been doing these videos. But again, look at this. This Bill and Melinda Gates piece of trash is talking about the psychology of hoarding. Yeah, they want to protect their loved ones from scumbags in suits like you.
People may be making bad decisions because they think it's more scarce than it actually is. So if we could have the equivalent of this dashboard to understand where the supplies are to map to the needs, a global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation. But the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
So, translation. I'm from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Okay? We want to work with the UN for global distribution of the drugs that we control to nations we like that indebt themselves to our world banks on some kind of refinance nonsense loan that means nothing. And then we'll choke out other nations that we don't want to help, like Iran. Because Iran's getting no help.
On your point of transparency and data about where supplies are, where medicines are, where N95 masks are, we couldn't agree more. We've been unable to find that data, so I think it's an important need that you just surfaced. George?
Yes, I would support for the proposal, centralized, coordinated effort, not just nationally, also internationally. At such a situation, that's very, very, very important. And when you read all this about the epi data, R naught is 2. It's relatively, you can see the number is there.
Let me stop this. This is a representative of the China CDC. Do you think China's been honest about the numbers? Do you think that China's measures weren't authoritarian against its people? Do you see how there's a counterpart here on this unelected table? And I know that some people want to believe that it's the left and the Chi-Coms and the Democrats. Listen, these guys don't bleed red or blue. No, 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 no. They bleed globalism. That's what they bleed. This is a full throttle deal where we are seeing a restructuring of everything through this event. And that's why we're doing this Event 201 watch along. For those that aren't familiar, this isn't the coronavirus today. This is their coronavirus outbreak, their novel coronavirus outbreak. The tabletop exercise from October 2019 put on by the World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. All people you did not vote in.
Especially when you are talking about some country like China or any countries who have the largest population of swine, pig production. So if the virus yet still, transmitted from pig still in the cycle, so that could be very serious. So we have to prioritize. So maybe the farmers or whoever have access to it. So that's very important to have the expert to assess the possibility. You see the R naught, but you also see it's swine origin. I will still have some new virus from swine, from pigs, or the virus already circulating in the human beings. That's also, we should put that into account.
And let me say why this is still significant, because he's talking about basically, remember, this coronavirus originates from pigs. If you actually watch something like Stephen King's The Stand from many years ago, they talk about that being a swine flu. That was a popular trope amongst this. But here's the thing. That's where this was very early on. Everybody's talking about the wet market in Wuhan. Now, a lot of you know they destroyed that wet market, but they found a family of 4 living inside of it before they did so. None of them tested positive for the virus. Now the script has changed. Now, I haven't watched the other 4 of these, and I highly doubt that the nation state of China, along with Iran, is going to accuse the United States of releasing a bioweapon. But at the end of the day, that's not really the Center for Disease Control on that side. That's the mechanisms of government. And that's what they want you to focus on now with this thing, right? Trump and Pompeo, they call it the Chinese virus. They want to quelch any idea it's a bioweapon of any sorts. I don't think it's a nation state. Yes, it may have come out of a lab. Yes, it may have been part of some kind of a weapons program, 100%. That's a very real possibility. But remember, the language of these globalists, these experts, are kind of masking the fact that there are two different strains already. And remember, he's talking about transmutation. And now I'm hearing rumors and stories, and I have no verification of this, that there are dogs that have tested positive for this. Ongoing fear. And like I said, even after this is done, whatever we come out on the other side, the fear will be used forever, just like Al-Qaeda was after 9/11 and terrorists, and they transmorphed that into ISIS. There'll be a new strain of COVID. It doesn't matter whether they jab everybody in the arm or not. This is the new reality, that you have an invisible enemy that can take on any form.
For the strategy for the allocation of the actual winner, and also I got the information from my staff, looks like, of course, we have capacity to produce the extra number, but even, think about the population we have. We can't expand our capacity, but, what we have, even not enough for our own population. That's the question we should think.
Yes.
See, and notice they're talking about overpopulation. You guys think I'm kidding you when I tell you the people at the top already think there are too many of us? That they look at you as a useless eater, whether you make $10,000 a year, $100,000 a year, or $10 million a year? They don't give one flying rat's ass about you and your family. This is a big game to them. In fact, it's a tabletop exercise. And again, I'll believe otherwise when a billionaire drops dead from this, or a member of the predator class goes down from this, because I don't see it happening, folks.
I think it's important in 2019 to remember that in 2016, the World Economic Forum, together with the World Food Program, presented a global supply chain management.
World, global, world, give up your rights. Give them up to world government.
Approach for this exact scenario. And what might be helpful, given that everybody suffers from short-term memory deficit, is to have an emergency briefing on those resources that are global public goods that are there to facilitate supply chain management and where those can be deployed, but also CEPI, which was established 3 years ago to accelerate vaccines exactly in development in these settings where a coronavirus is, in fact, one of its indications and first.
Look at him smile. Look how happy he is. Well, actually, we've already set into motion that we'll have vaccines for this sort of thing, and we won't have any regulations, and human experimentation is going to take right off. How could you be happy about any of this bullshit? Even if it's just a game to you. My goodness.
Areas of focus. That may not be common knowledge. Likewise, on the financing, there is global financing. The criteria identified here would be triggers for the Pandemic Emergency Financing Facility, which would disperse a significant amount of money into that international pool on the basis of this trajectory of the epidemic.
And let's just talk about this for a second, because we know the dollar's crushed, right? If you're still holding on to that fairy tale that the dollar's coming back, it's not. Mr. Gritch, thank you so much. My thoughts and good wishes to you, JB, Karma, and the family, and the Burmese Brigade. Much love to you, brother. But the dollar is crushed, so what are they really talking about? Well, we're talking about world banks. We're talking about SDR units anyway the last decade. Thank you, Ray Foley. Appreciate that, brother. Think about it for a second. SDR, special drawing rights, zeros and ones in a computer. They don't even have to print it off Venezuelan style, baby. Not Zimbabwe style, my friend. All right? They mask it. So if you don't think this is going to be some kind of a digital takeover, a cash takeover, a track trace database, use this crisis takeover, you're not paying attention. You're not paying. This guy is gleeful talking about this and the global funds for people. This is the tabletop exercise from October. From October. All right? This is 6 months ago. You think this guy's mindset has changed 6 months ago? You think he's not having these same discussions now? They planned it out.
So those are resources that may not be well understood amongst the set of players that would appreciate having some understanding. So an emergency briefing on those resources, I think, might make sure that they're not overlooked.
Asti, and then Matt.
So a couple of things. First of all, the patients who are currently on Extranavir need to receive different medication. So I think this is something that the team needs to look into. How do we make sure that we have the right resources to make sure that they're not being panicked and we're not causing panic with them and that we're having to use this drug for a different use at this time. Secondly, I think it's very important that we make sure that there is concise communication with all healthcare facilities where these patients are being treated so that there isn't mass panic. And perhaps a member of this team could be part of that task force to ensure that whether it's in the news, by social media, or to these hospitals, we have the right communications channel.
So here we go. News, social media, communications channels. Now they're talking about what? An antiviral drug to treat this. What are we talking about with our real coronavirus outbreak? Well, hydrochlorine is now, or chloroquine, I probably am mispronouncing it, is starting to make its way into the news with another antiviral. David Ho is out there. Protease inhibitors, man. That's the guy that cured AIDS and HIV for rich people in 1996. Go look it up. If you're not watching this on your phone already, just type it in, Dr. David Ho cures AIDS, or Time Man of the Year. All real if you had money, if you had power. You cured it then, okay? But here's where all the information or disinformation really comes from. So forget about the drugs and the vaccines that they're pushing. You know, they're still pushing the vaccine idea. What are they talking about with hospitals? Well, they're talking about the masks. They're talking about the ventilators. And they're trying not to cause panic. And again, they've known what the real numbers are for some time, but they've hid those real numbers because they know how the public is. And again, even if this thing only has like a 0.6% kill rate, mortality rate, that's still 6 times more than the flu. And if it has, a 3.6, that's 36 times more. All right, we're not even going to go up into the numbers on that. South Korea has actually done pretty good work. I give them some credit, but at the same time, you look at what's happening in Italy. How much can we believe? That's a healthcare system. So the idea that they're not going to spread panic is key here, and they're going to use media outlets to do so. Morton Mickelson, much love to you. Best wishes. Thank you, brother. Much love to you. Let's continue on.
To be able to make sure that the public does not have mass panic.
Thanks, Matt.
I was just going to, I'll add to that in as much as the value of a centralized convening body that is addressing both the production and supply chain also serves as a convening enterprise around the communications. Because there is a lot of great data that's been collected, but probably more can be done from a public education perspective around containment prevention while the supply chain is managed.
Yvonne?
So again, containment while the supply chain is managed. That's what you're seeing now. All right? Everything's shutting down. There's going to be soft lockdowns, different levels of enforcement, but one of the first things they're going to contain is New York City on a mass level. I'll say it again. There was never any outbreak in New Rochelle. We were the frog being boiled in the pot. And unfortunately, we're already belly up. You got some time to protect your family and make a plan and prepare, yes. But are any of us ready for this? F no. F no. How could you be ready for this? Anybody who's telling you they're ready for this, they don't know what this is. They haven't understood what this is. This is, again, a bunch of unelected bureaucrats like this guy telling you what's what and how to live your life. Okay, they're going to contain you until they can manage the situation and get it under control. That's what this is.
I just want to echo Matt's point, and my question here is, what's happening around the world? While we know that there are cases here in these few countries, what's happening to the rest of Asia? What are governments doing to assure the people? And this will help to relax some of the stress that you see in terms of people hoarding personal protection equipment. So I think it requires a global coordination and not just at the individual country-specific level.
So once again, they keep talking about this global coordination. Now, don't get me wrong. I want the data, excuse me, from Italy. Absolutely, 100% want that data. 1,000% want that data, right? But what are they pushing? They're pushing NWO, New World Order, global-like control. I'll say it again. None of these people are elected officials. None of them. And they're the same damn minions of that predator class I'm talking about that do their bidding. Okay, come on.
Yeah, Brad?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Christopher's scarcity comment. It's not just scarcity, it's also severity, and that's why we see different rates of fatalities, 5% to 3%. And there seems to be a stakeholder maybe missing here, and I may be wrong, but is the provider, and who's taking care of these patients? Because there's definitely discrepancies here on fatality rates. We know in panic, in psychology of panic, people start hoarding. People start, freaking out and wondering, what should I do? And then countries start doing it, and then there's all kinds of dysfunctional decisions made. Providers really need to be at the table talking about how they're taking care of the patients and diagnostics and what they're doing with it, because we're jumping to a little bit of a conclusion that this is going to spread everywhere to the same degree. And this leads to hoarding, and I'll share with you in SARS, N95s, there's still N95s sitting in boxes that were never used. I mean, the hoarding of that was atrocious. I mean,
the hoarding of that was atrocious. Well, I'll tell you what. N95s that were not used in boxes are in short supply today, sir. The panic sure has ensued, has it not? And in this very real pandemic, at least real to us, it doesn't seem like medical facilities have what they need. And it seems like, and again, I'm in New York, guys. They haven't really even tested any of these nurses. All right? We have confirmed cases in Otsego County. This is how I know they're lying. And they're not making the news. I've got a confirmed death there. It's not making the news. They're telling you what they want you to know in slow rollouts. And they're shaming you for daring to prepare your loved ones. Do you not see that theme in the fictitious Event 201 and the very real COVID-19?
And then there were knockoffs of N95s that really weren't truly impervious masks that were made and then distributed. So I think there's a need to have the providers in the discussion to see really what they're doing to treat the patients. How severe is the epidemic?
So just on severity, it's important for you all to know that the estimate from our team and from other ministries of health is that the distinctions in case fatality rate represent distinctions in data collection, not that the disease is any different. It looks like the virus is the same around the world. These are different healthcare systems, different data collection, different surveillance. So overall, our all-in case fatality rate is somewhere in the order of 7% to 10%.
So again, we haven't heard 7 to 10% in the United States yet. But I want to make it very clear that if you watched part 1 of this and you saw the representative from the World Health Organization that joined via video, he's talked about the death rate being up to 10%. And we do have a 39-year-old American with no underlying conditions, a young woman who died today. All right, and more of those stories are going to come out. Remember in the UK, we had a 20-year-old man who was given antibiotics twice and dropped dead. Okay, and that guy had leukemia and didn't know it. So you can talk about underlying conditions. He's 20 years old and he has undiagnosed cancer. Especially with this disease, it's going to be a lot different. So we are being talked to like children. The selective testing is there. Now, if you're only testing symptomatic people and you already know that it's asymptomatically traveled and that, we already have community spread throughout the country, we should just be doing random swaths of testing so we can get an idea of how many people are actually infected and how many people who are actually infected get actually sick and show symptoms. Then maybe you could take down the panic and the fear factor. But that's not what this is. That's never what this was.
It depends on where we are in the world. And in terms of where the disease is in the world, we see lots of blank spots, and we think that's partly or largely due to surveillance systems and the slowness in collecting this data in certain parts of the world. We expect that to come online quickly.
And you know what? Let's talk about the surveillance systems really quick. The big data is in. We already, again, all these big companies are already working with the military-industrial complex. We're already having all these conference calls. Walmart is already set to be the big store where you're going to be able to go get stuff when you're allowed to leave your home. Okay? All that stuff is very real. But now, Google, Apple, all your providers. This thing, you don't think they're going to fucking, and I'm sorry I cursed, enforce quarantining and self-isolation and movement through your GPS location? You don't think they're going to be able to track, trace, and database that and then scorn you if you were somewhere you weren't supposed to be? Come on. It's 2020.
Steve, and then Avril, you haven't had a chance.
No, Steve.
Go ahead, I think you haven't had a chance.
Okay, sure. I mean, I think it's just in terms of the precise question being asked, it's clear that having everybody go on their own is not going to be the most effective answer, right? So I absolutely agree with the comments that have been made that we need to have some kind of international mechanism for coordinating what it is that we would be doing, also for collecting information, also for understanding what the resources are that are available through international.
And by the way, this woman is a minion of the National Security Council. She's retired. She's former. But again, she's never elected to anything. And when we talk about former intelligence agents and former intelligence assets and former intelligence officers, well, a lot of times they get scooped up by those privatized intelligence organizations that get subcontracted out by the alphabet agencies. The Kissinger Institutes, the Straffers, the Black Cubes, the Booz Allen Hamiltons.
Mechanisms to execute on that allocation and coordination. I think it's challenging to set it up in a way that says that international mechanism has to be the body that decides in all circumstances.
Again, a global national mechanism deciding everything. Everybody was on me. This is it, man. This is the global transformative event. Let's say it again. 9/11 meets 1984 meets 1929. Here it is.
What the allocation is. In other words, I think states are going to want to be able to decide for themselves on, in some circumstances, some of the issues that are relevant. So one of the challenges will be ensuring that you're using an existing mechanism, and I think Sophia's right about the UN as being sort of the base of operations in a sense, both for the funding but also for a whole series of other issues that you would be looking at for allocation, coordination, et cetera. But then making sure that states are stepping up to actually tell people what it is that they're doing, what their decisions are in that context, and creating transparency about what the proper allocation should be for containing this issue so that they're...
Transparency is something we haven't had in this situation at all from any of these governments, from any of these authorities. That's something we certainly didn't get out of China. There wasn't transparency there. Our media certainly didn't have any transparency of what's going on in Iran. Okay? The mainstream media certainly isn't showing people what's going on in Italy. The mainstream media certainly wasn't showing the real transparency and the things that I was featuring, weeks ago that officials like de Blasio, Cuomo, Trump, etc. were saying, Pence, and where this was going. No, they weren't covering the supply chain being broken out of China. So again, these people are there to backpat, encourage global governance, encourage nations to become indebted and enslaved by them so that they'll take care of them like the pets they are.
Can be pressure put to bear on ensuring that states are actually doing what the larger plan needs to be in that context.
Can I ask a follow-up question? If there is a centralized stockpile developed, either at the WHO or perhaps somewhere else in the UN system, if you were going to suggest that, or some other entity, how much can you imagine states contributing of the supplies that are being made in their own countries? Is this a 1% allocation, 20% of the supply that they're making? We've already heard from George that China's not making nearly enough medication to take care of China.
And here's the thing. It's been exposed now that maybe we shouldn't be getting 90% of our goods from China. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's going to end globalization. I don't think so. I think it's just going to bring back factory work to the United States because a lot of people aren't going to have jobs that they thought. And really, when automation comes in, those jobs won't be there either. There's a good chance we're going to see a very different global economic system after this. Okay, and remember, what has China been pushing? The 1.2 billion person nation, the person on the panel for the CDC? That's social credit score, baby. They sure have.
At this point. So what is the desired end state here? Can you, from a state security perspective, of someone who's worked at the top of government, what do you imagine states who have this medication doing?
I mean, I think the percentage will depend on the details, right, and what it is that you're capable of actually producing in the context of the particular crisis. And I don't know how much we're able to produce under this circumstance. I think there should be, and there would be, from a public perspective and a public health perspective, right, enormous interest in promoting an allocation to international efforts that would actually contain the issue as quickly as possible, right? And that should be the focus for everybody, in the sense of that's what's going to actually help you prevent the downstream impact of what the trajectory holds for us. So the question is, can you, through this international mechanism, really promote commitments to doing this as quickly as possible and give people a sense that...
Promote commitments, get people involved in globalization. We need the World Health Organization. We need the United Nations. It's all about empowering unelected bureaucrats.
Actually, if they contribute more, that they will have a better chance of protecting their own populations and their country's security.
Okay. Another number of comments. You all just jump in.
Yeah. So, thank you. So to be completely clear, most of this production would already be committed in contracts.
Yes.
It is almost unheard of that people are producing product without having a forward commitment for the consumption of that product. So the first thing that needs to be done, because this is not something that the countries currently control, unless countries are going to bring about emergency situations and co-opt an existing supply chain. So the first thing to do is to figure out where that's going. Now, in H1N1, in a number of cases, so the Australian government, we bought vaccine to the extent we could get it, and in some instances we actually gave some of that vaccine. We actually gave some of that vaccine to the United States, who actually ended up with a supply shortage at that particular point. So, inconsistent with working out where the biggest vulnerabilities are, the first thing you need to do is figure out who's got control of those supply chains and those products, and then figure out where, for the greater global good, it should be deployed. But we
the greater global good.
Need to be clear. Any government who says, I'm going to ship every single dose of a particular product offshore is going to end up with a challenge domestically. So giving governments the capacity to manage both their domestic concerns together with...
What do you mean? Like, once again, why are we giving governments the capacity? Like think about it. Shouldn't we all be responsible for our own thing? We had a Constitution and Bill of Rights. Again, if you tuned in late in the very beginning, that's the big thing that's going on. DOJ wants to suspend constitutional rights of Americans. They're gone. They've been gone. FEMA has been activated. The National Guard has been deployed. They were gone. That is a deceptive headline. I told you, and it sucks. But this was it. This is it. This was the last grasp of anything we had with our constitutional republic. It's done. I hate to say it. Global good, World Health Organization, United Nations, lockdown, self-isolation, quarantine, drastic measures. It's all being talked about right now. And these are the people that war-gamed it in October 2019. These are the people that are making decisions right now about your lives and your loved ones.
Being good players. And we know from the PIP framework that companies will similarly contribute, but it's got to be in an organised framework.
Okay.
And that challenge, I think, is being proved out with the increasing rhetoric, both by candidates in the US, UK, and Germany, who are saying that globalism is responsible for this pandemic, and therefore there's a rising protectionist nature to take care of their own. And so I think it's an instance where the business, health, and scientific communities need to combat that rising rhetoric. And
can't be somebody that criticizes globalism. We got to combat that rhetoric. What? What? Excuse me? Oh, you want to restrict my speech because I don't think that unelected globalist predator class minions should be in control of this? Or things like this? Huh. Social Observer, Georgia Guidestones erected March 22nd, 1980. FF tomorrow, or the big one. I think that we're going to get the soft lockdown, the shelter-in-place order tomorrow. Non-essential businesses will be closed nationwide. I think that is coming. I think that, Trump has just been waiting to say it. But listen to this guy really carefully. We have to stop the rhetoric of people blaming globalism for this pandemic, while a bunch of globalists sit at a table and war game our lives.
Leading information.
Yeah, and last a couple of comments here. We have about 2 minutes before we have to close.
So I think one thing that's going to be very important is to define the aim of using the countermeasure. And from what we know right now, it doesn't seem likely from the data we've had presented that this countermeasure is going to suppress transmission, is going to lead to containment. So our aim really would be to minimize the severity and to prevent death rather than to prevent this emerging pandemic. Second thing I wanted to say is just how important communication is, and that is true to the public. This is a very alarming situation, and I think public communication shouldn't be alarming, but should be truthful about how severe it is.
Shouldn't be alarming, but should be truthful. Let's pat them on the head. Okay, let's pat them on the head and treat them like animals and slowly give them information as we're getting ready to contain them. Remember, this is the guy that wanted containment. Rennie Stepp says, thank you for all your hard work. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Morton Mickelson comes in again. Felt I was being a lot of Madakish there. You have so many great people. Can this end too bad? I mean, this could end horribly. I'll listen, man. I'm taking it one day at a time. But best case scenario ain't great. It ain't great. It's not something I'm happy about. Should anybody, again, be happy that they're going to be treated like a pet? That you're being told to stay in your home? Should anybody be happy about that? Really? Really?
I think also internally, as negotiations are going on to share countermeasures, I think it's not likely, I agree, that countries are not going to buy a countermeasure to put into a global supply without retaining a large portion of it for themselves. The last thing I'd say is this is a very dynamic situation. Countries will be negotiating with manufacturers, and I think that's got to be figured into whatever agreement is reached. And whatever that sharing agreement is, it won't be perfect, and I think it's just got to be done quickly so that sharing can actually take place rather than trying to get something that's exactly the way everyone wants it.
So let's talk about this. They talk a big game about sharing information and then sharing medications, but I mean, there is papers out there from China showing success with massive infusions of vitamin C through intravenous means, not oral means. Where is that in our media? Vitamin C is pretty abundant here in the States and across the world. Yet I haven't heard of one trial or one test in the United States on that. Now, is that the type of rhetoric that goes against globalism that should be controlled? I'm not saying it cures it. I'm saying there's papers out there claiming that it's a positive thing. It's something that we should be looking into. So why aren't we? Because this is about the containment of truth. This is about the containment of you and your soul, baby. And this is about the rise of something very dark and very different.
I think that governments are going to need to break contracts, have companies break contracts in order to redirect antivirals?
I think that would work best for the countries to make the decisions with the countermeasures that they purchased.
Okay.
I think that's a very, we're not talking about one supply chain, but we have multiple supply chains here. And I think, before we start talking about companies withdrawing antiretrovirals from patients with HIV who have a disease, we need to really understand how those ARVs will be used in patients who may or may not have a disease. So demand forecasting will be critical. And I also want to point out, it's not just the healthcare workers. We have supply chains in middle-income countries. Often those are very resource-dense, people in small spaces producing masks. We have to think about the integrity and the health of the supply chain.
So again, people in small spaces. But when you got China, and they'll just shut everything down and quarantine people and then just move people that are extremely expendable in, they're Uyghur Muslim slaves. Do you think that they're practicing social distancing and washing their hands? And, again, the big thing, I heard about at the press conference that the Trump one today, they're talking about hand sanitizer again. Get the F out of here with that. Trash.
Okay.
Going back
yes.
to Stephen's note real quick about the public communication, my team has been monitoring the public response, and on various social media channels and cable networks, there's been some conspiracy theories that are around about the potential that pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit.
You hear that? You are not allowed to talk about somebody releasing this. Could be a government, could be the UN. We better combat that on social media. Let us never entertain outrageous conspiracy theories about the attacks of September 11th. George W. Bush? So again, we're talking about conspiracy theories that Big Pharma or the UN did this. Now, again, that's not the nation states. Now, is, again, China allowed to accuse the U.S.? Because we're in that very real situation. But we better clamp down on news outlets and social media that may be buying into conspiracy theories about the virus, the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus that we're drilling down here in our unelected, globalist, minion exercise.
So as we move forward, obviously trust in pharmaceuticals and government is very important at this moment. And so as we move forward with developing the right scenarios, we have to make sure that the public communication is a major part of that because of these conspiracy theories.
Thank you. We have to close. We have 30 seconds.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
Mark.
this fully supports Steve's input. We should not search for the perfect solution right now. Yeah. We run against time. And if conspiracy theories like this come up already, so we are on the edge of hysterical reactions, and then it gets out of control.
And right now, guys, I hate to tell you, but if there is a self-isolation order, if there is a run on the banks, if the banks have a holiday, the hysteria will really start to begin. When people realize what's actually going down, when they wake up out of their dream state and start to get that everything's not going to be okay the next few months in this country and around the world. Yeah, hysteria is going to kick off. And remember, these are the minions of the monster predator class that war-gamed it right in front of you via Johns Hopkins, via the World Economic Forum in Davos, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
And that's the thing what should be the main driver for us now to find a solution.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to bring these recommendations together and communicate them broadly at the conclusion of this meeting. Thank you all for your input. We will conclude this meeting and we'll reconvene shortly.
Yes, and that.
And guys, so we're gonna do part 2. We're gonna do part 3, part 4, and part 5. I know this is part 2 to you guys, but this was part 1 of the exercise. So we're not done. You know, again, I'd rather be talking about other things. I'd rather be talking about a lot of the other topics that I've done a lot of stuff on. But this is the most important story out there. So this is the global transformative event, and people need to know it. If you can support me now, I need you more than ever. While the supply chain and money is still very real, you know, I'm using it. And I want to say this, guys. I told you guys on my walk and talk today that my friend got his cancer surgery. Now, they gave him a year best to live. Thank you very much, Ryan, for that super chat. They gave him a year best. Now, he was in, I think it was a 14 to 16 hour surgery. They took the tumor out of his arm. They took muscle out of his back. They reconstructed it. But I think it's chlorosarcoma or chordosarcoma. Some kind of sarcoma is what they diagnosed him with. Because of you guys, I dropped a couple $100 on him today, and I got him the Joe Tippins MyCancerStory.rocks treatment. Got him the Fenben, everything but the CBD, which my other friend is taking care of. And I mean, guys, he asked me to come down there in the next couple months, and you know I'm not going to be able to. He's in Long Island. I'm praying everything's going to be somewhat okay there. And film him on a green screen so he could speak to his baby. His wife's pregnant right now. This guy, you know, I've known him for 20 plus years, a very good friend of mine, lived with him. And because of you guys, I think, you know, I'm not giving up. And I told him, God damn it, man, you're going to fight, and this isn't over. And I'm sending you the package right now, and he gets it in 4 days. Hopefully he'll be out of the hospital because it's going to be a war zone in there soon, at his home. And I'm praying. And I'm praying for everybody I love right now. And I'm not a religious guy. I'm not telling you where to put your faith. Certainly not in me. I make mistakes. I'm a human being, but I try to tell you the truth. And I'm hoping that we can do the best we can in this very, very terrible situation. We can prepare those that need to be, and hopefully we can save some lives. That's what this is about. So one more time, guys, if you want to support me, please do. I promise I'm going to be back on the Rockfin with exclusives soon. That is a great way to support me. I just haven't been able to do it right now. Subscribe, share. We're well over 40,000 now. Took 2 months to get from 39,500 to 40, and now we're taking off. I wish we were taking off in other circumstances. And then my Twitter feed is just rife with all the news that's fit to print about this. Every angle you can imagine, every mainstream outlet, every picture of military on the streets in this country and abroad. So once again, thank you guys. Brian, thank you so much. In the near future, get us a John Fitch interview. Fitch will be on Monday. We're still going to do Mixed Martial Mindset. Thanks, Randy, for that other super chat there. So yeah, no, Fitch will be there. Don't worry. And Fitch is with his kids. And God bless him and hope he's doing well. I'm hoping you're all doing well. All right. So it's time to suit up, guys. This is the real deal. We're going to do some more Event 2-on-1 stuff in the near future. Thank you for joining me on this Saturday evening. I love you guys. I'll see you on the flip side.